considering that the system as we know it is at least a semi-failure, you've suggested that we can move from a leader as a hero based organization to a community organization. And there are steps to get there. First of all, what is a community-based organization? Is it utopic? Is it seriously feasible? And at the end of the day, at the end of the quarter, do you have better results because you have a community-based organization?
Well, let me clarify, because the word community it can be used in two different senses. Mm-hmm. Community-based may be taken as based in a larger community. We don't. I don't think you mean that. I don't mean that. I mean the organization functioning as a community itself. Okay, and I would argue that almost everybody in this room, if we asked you which of the companies or any organizations you most admire, you're going to name companies that have a strong sense of community, in the sense that people care about the place, they're respected, and the company respects them, they respect the company, they're dealt with in a proper manner, and so on and so forth. These are not the companies that fire 5,000 people every time they don't meet their numbers on Wall Street. Okay? It's one thing if you're General Motors and you're in bankruptcy and you're firing people, I understand that. It's quite another thing when you're a hugely successful company making tons of profit, like some of the pharmaceutical companies, and then aren't making quite as much profit as you did before, so you fire 5,000 people. Were those people always redundant? If they were always redundant, how come you didn't fire them before? Were you managing before? If these 5,000 people from one day to the next, coincidentally corresponding to not meeting your targets on Wall Street or Bay Street or whatever it is, were those people useless before? Where was management before? Did they suddenly become useless? No. This is a game that's being played, and it depreciates the company, and it destroys any sense of community that remains. And I would argue that almost every company was a sense of community at the beginning. There was a strong sense of feeling when it was entrepreneurial, when it was growing, and so on. And gradually, as it got bigger and maybe shifted from being an exploring company, an innovator, to an exploiting company, you know, lobbying the government and doing all these different things, as it shifted, it lost that sense of community. Nothing harms it more than firing all these people, because the ones who left behind, they're just covering their rear ends and basically saying, I better look after myself because they're not going to look after me. And any company that's been doing that, and that's, if you look at the Fortune 500, that's a huge number of companies, has been undermining their very sense of enterprise. Let me just add something. American business was built on the sense of enterprise. Not just enterprises, but enterprise. People were enthusiastic, they were energetic, and so on. That sense of enterprise has been horribly undermined by this kind of downsizing. And that's what I meant at the beginning by the depreciation of the American economy.
You were saying that at the onset, usually enterprises don't behave that way. It's in their growth process eventually that they lose something of their...
Many. Not all.
Can you identify in the growth of an enterprise the point at which things sort of, the tipping point where things change and you lose the sense of community?
Executive bonuses might be a good place to start. When you start paying these bonuses, to me, that's the beginning of the end. Now, you get companies like what I read not too long ago, a company like Costco, where he pays himself, the chief executive, almost nothing. On the other hand, he's the chief executive, he's the founder, so he's got tons of stock, so he can afford to be paid nothing, but still he's sending a message. Your salary as a chief executive is sending a huge message to everybody else in the place. The message that's being sent today is, I'm the only one who matters, or I matter, or at least more accurately, I matter much more than anybody else in this place.
You're facing a crowd of HR people. Where do they come in that idea of a enterprise as a community? Or where have they failed, maybe?
A lot of the interesting HR people to me, and I just spent a 3-day conference with some of them who are in the audience. A lot of them are almost fifth column. They're almost kind of people who try and change that organization not in the conventional ways of HR, but in the sense of they know what has to be done to bring about this sense of community. They'll engage the company in management programs that build community. We can talk about that later. And they do all sorts of things to enhance that. And they believe in that. And if there's a chief executive who's sympathetic to that, then they can do an awful lot. The first thing that HR people can do, I'm sorry to insult almost everybody in the room, but I'm actually not sorry at all. But the first thing that they can do is get rid of that damn R. Okay, I am not a human resource. I'm a human being. I am not human capital. I am not a human asset. I'm a human being. And you could do well to call yourself the human being department or the people department or even personnel, which went out decades ago. A lot better. Human resources is an awful term when you really think about it.
Well, worst is human capital, I thought.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty tight contest, but I think they kind of go together.
But it says something, of course. If you look at people as human capital or human resources.
It also says something about how the whole economic perspective on the world is taking over. We are social animals, we're political animals, we're economic animals. And all you hear is the economic these days, especially in government and so on. We're tilting, the way the communist states tilted towards the political or government, we tilt towards markets and economic, although we don't tilt towards markets at all because a lot of big companies are would-be monopolists. But there's a tilting towards the market side of things or the economic side of things, whereas a healthy society has competitive markets, and they're very important. I want people to compete for my money to buy my restaurant food or my cars or whatever it is. I want healthy markets, but I don't want markets to dominate my social life or my political life. And in the United States, in particular, the power of the corporations over the political process is horrible.
And in the end, I'm not sure that God, or the market as God, is working that well anyway. Yeah. And that you're as competitive as you like to think you are at the end of the day.
Sure.
Just a clarification for my friends in the back. Would love to read some of the tweet, but we would need binoculars to get to that. It's that big, so if you could just boost the characters there on the screen, and eventually we'll get your questions. And you can, at any time, send your question, and eventually we'll get to that. Merci beaucoup.
Put them up there.
Well, that would be great, but if they're as big as I see them now, nobody will be able to read the questions. Expanding on the concept we were just talking about, you were saying that in effect, and I know it's not semantic, we should look...
I missed it. What did you say?
I said it's not just a matter of semantic, but
okay.
You are really keen on moving from a manager or worker-based organization to a citizen-based organization. And I stress that it was not just semantic, because, of course, if you look at yourself as a citizen of the corporation, I guess you're a different kind of stakeholder as well.
Yeah, or a member. I think member is also a good term. Because citizens can also get confused with politics. But look, we're individuals, we're social animals, we've got the individual level, the community level, the national or the collective level. And we function on all those levels. But what's critically important is that middle level of the community level. And being citizens of the community or members of the community is critically important. And when you give people half a chance, they get so enthusiastic. And they want everybody, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to go to work feeling good about themselves, feeling good about their company, feeling good about the situation. People want to do that. It's critically important for them. And we take it away with individualistic performance measures where you're measured as an individual. We take it away by all this downsizing. We take it away by paying these dysfunctional bonuses to senior people and so on and so forth.
You, of course, have studied corporations that have succeeded in that way. Pixar, the studio, is one, animation studio. Yep. Semco of Brazil, very often cited in that respect. What are they doing? What can we learn from them that other corporations aren't doing?
Well, let me give you a couple of examples from IKEA. I think these are wonderful stories because my argument is interesting strategies aren't usually created in an executive suite or a retreat where everybody goes off and magically they're going to develop strategy between the 3rd and the 4th of January. Yeah, that's not the way strategies are learned. They're learned as people solve problems and so on, and little initiatives can grow into massive strategies. So if you said, what's the strategy of IKEA? If you're a kind of a formal strategy sort of person, you're going to look at market position and furniture and all that. But if you get right down to it, IKEA, the heart and soul of IKEA's strategy is essentially selling knocked down or unassembled furniture. And you go in, you go through this kind of nice looking store, and then you go into a warehouse and you take it yourself and put it in your car. That's essentially what they do. It's massive, hugely successful. Well, where did those things come from? You know where the disassembled furniture came from? A worker tried to put a table in his car, and he couldn't fit it in, so he took off the legs. And somebody, I don't know if it was a worker, not even a manager, and I guess somebody said, gee, maybe he said, I forget who it was, said, gee, if we have to take off the legs, maybe they have to take off the legs too. That's how one of the great strategies in the furniture business came to be. The warehouse, they opened a huge store in Stockholm. It was mobbed the first day. The people were lined up to collect their purchases through a conventional, give the piece of paper, go find, somebody finds it, brings it back. They just gave up, took down all the barriers and said, you know what, go find it yourself. That's where interesting strategies come to be. Not all this nonsense of SWOT and strengths and weaknesses and threats and opportunity and all these abstractions. Strategies come to be as people learn how to deal with customers and learn how to deal with problems.
Trial and errors, I guess.
Yeah.
In fact, you've sort of described steps by which an enterprise can get to engage management. And the first step, if I'm right, was community building starts with small group of committed managers. It's not top down. You'll have to have small group of committed managers. And then you have to slow them down and give them space to think.
To reflect, yeah.
To reflect. What happens then?
Well, the model of change that's so popular, and you read it, John Cotter, everybody else in the Harvard Business Review, is the sort of great leaders come up with these great visions. God knows where they come from, because at least Moses was handed the tablets, but it's not clear who hands the tablets to the chief executive today. But they come up with these great visions, and then they implement, and they bring people on side, and all this kind of stuff. Everybody kind of falls in line. Another way to view it, actually, there's a wonderful quote, I don't have it in my head, from Margaret Mead that says something like, never underestimate the power of a few people to change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. Okay, who started the French Revolution? Who stormed the Bastille? I don't think history even knows who stormed the Bastille. Who carried out the Boston Tea Party? I guess somewhere in American history somebody can name the people who did the Boston Tea Party, but it wasn't George Washington who started the Boston Tea Party. It wasn't Robespierre who stormed the Bastille. So a small group of committed people can kind of grow. And what they can do is form a little kind of skunk works almost, or they sit back and they kind of reflect on what this organization needs and how they're going to go about doing it. And as they come up with things, they share with other groups, and this thing can spread across an organization. And that's how a lot of the interesting social changes have taken place. We're just doing a paper, Guy, my colleague and doctoral student sitting here in the audience, and we're doing a paper on what we call why not social initiatives, because looking at social initiatives around the world, especially in Brazil where there's so many interesting ones, those social initiatives usually, there are exceptions, but usually they don't come from government, they don't come from business, they come from small groups in society who just kind of get together and start driving change.